Good morning, all. Brian S. Pratt here. Going to read another chapter of Shepherd's Quest, Book 1 of the Broken Key Trilogy. Going to do chapter 14 today. So, a quick recap. The boys, Ryan, Chad, Bart, have set out, are determined to find the King's Horde. And to do that, they're going to utilize the map on the back of the segment of the key that they have in their possession. Now, none of them are familiar with the markings. They've thought that the magistrate's office there in Quillim has a map, so they're going to try to. So they tried to get in to see it earlier that day. They were denied access. Now they're going to sneak into it. So, and then hopefully, because there's this little notation there that Bart's convinced designates a city or something, and that's where they need to start. So they're going to break into the magistrate's office, look at the map, and see if it tells them what's going on. See, and they're trying to be very stealthy about everything because Fear, the fence back in Mordine, indicated that these there's treasure hunters out there who, if it's known or when it becomes known that they discovered all of these silver king's coins, that the hunt will be on again, and before they know it, they're going to have all these people after them. So they got to do as much as they can before that happens, because it's not a question of if, but when. All right, so here's chapter 14, and they're heading to the magistrate's office. Later that night, when the town grew dark, three shadows moved in the dark. They wended their way through the buildings until the town hall rose out of the darkness before them. Stopping for only a brief moment in the shadows of a bordering building, Bart made sure no one was around. Then he led Ryan and Chad toward the main door. "Are you sure this is such a good idea?" asked Ryan. "No one's around this late at night," replied Bart. "Besides, we'll only be a moment." "Exactly," Chad interjected. "It's not like we're planning on taking anything." "Just keep an eye out until I get the door open," Bart told the other two. Taking out his lockpicks, he pulled out two of the instruments and worked on the lock. This lock was a rather simple one. Nothing better had ever been needed in the little sleepy town of Quillim. It took him but a moment before he felt the lock turn. "Okay," he whispered and opened the door. Bart moved inside and was quickly followed by Chad and Ryan. He relocked the door once it was shut. They followed him to the stairs, where they made their way up to the third floor in the dark. Moving in the all but absolute darkness of the town hall's interior forced them to step carefully. Ryan had thought they should bring a lantern, but Bart had argued against it. "You aren't really going to need it if you just move slowly enough," he explained. "Also, it might be seen by someone passing by outside." He did, however, bring an item for light, something he called a tube lantern. It was little more than a hollowed-out piece of wood, 6 inches long with a diameter of 3 inches. The stub of a candle was placed inside. When the candle was lit, it aimed a beam of light at a specified location rather than illuminating the entire room. He told them this was a little item his father claimed to have thought up. It's a flashlight. That's all it really is. It's a flashlight. But I would think thieves would use that. I've never heard of that in the past. I'm sure I've heard of bullseye lanterns, but I've never heard of something like this. I like being creative. Ryan recognized it from earlier that afternoon. When he had taken the flock out to graze as he promised his mother, Chad and Bart accompanied him. They also dropped off old Glea's package, for which she was very thankful. While they were out, Bart had found the piece of wood and began carving out its insides. When they asked what he was doing, he just grinned but wouldn't answer. As it turned out, he had been making the tube lantern. They followed the stairs up until they reached the third floor landing. There they headed down the hallway to the end in the magistrate's office. None were surprised to find that the door was locked, but it was just as simple as the one below, and Bart had it open in no time. "They don't worry too much about breakage around here, do they?" he asked once the lock was opened. Chad chuckled. What would anyone steal? True, replied Bart, then opened the door. Several windows spaced along two of the walls allowed light from the moon and stars to filter in. It cast the room in a multitude of shadows. Over here, Ryan said as he moved to the right. In the faint light coming in through the windows, they saw the outline of a map framed upon the wall. Just give me a second, Bart said as he settled to the floor. He then set the tube lantern on the floor and worked to get the stub lit. Once the wick caught, light came out of the end and created a line of sight across the floor. That's pretty cool, Chad said. I know, Bart replied with a grin. Standing up, he took the tube lantern in hand and showed them how it only illuminated a circular area directly in front of where he pointed it. My father has all sorts of useful and unique items. Never heard of anything like this before, Ryan said as he watched the circle of light move across the wall. No, I wouldn't think so, said Bart. He's pretty protective of his things. Not too many people even know about most of them. Makes you wonder what else he has, right? As he moved the light to reveal the map, Ryan took the piece of the golden key from out of his pocket. I wonder, I know some people have commented that they love my books because it gives them lots of ideas as Dungeon Masters. And I guess that's the whole point. You know, it's like Dungeons and Dragons. But the tube lantern, do you think anyone out there has ever used the tube lantern, read this and thought, man, hasn't my thief been doing that before? And now all of a sudden tube lanterns are becoming the standard out there. Who knows? He shined the light on the map and saw where Quillim was prominently displayed in the center. The rest of the map radiated out in every direction. The map extended as far north as to just above Yerix and southward a little past Wardeen. The mountains to the west filled in the left side of the map, while the lands of Duke York filled out the right. It's funny how when you're writing this stuff, your mind just adds words adds words that's not there. But yet, when you go back, I read this through last night, and yet I still miss stuff. I don't know how professional editors do it. I just don't know. I guess they have software or something that helps them out. But man, they must be really good at the job. I don't see it, Ryan said. No, agreed Bart. This map doesn't show enough of the land. Then how are we to know where this place is? Questioned Chad. That's a good question, replied Ryan. How are we going to figure it out without anyone else discovering what we're looking for? In the back of his mind, he remembered Thea saying that there would come a time when the coins he bought from them would become known. The last thing Ryan wanted was for them to leave a trail for others to follow. Is there another place that would have a map? Asked Chad. One that might show a wider area? In Wardeen, there's a cartographer by the name of Benin that has a variety of maps depicting the known world, explained Bart, or so he claims. But if we seek his help, then others could find out where we went, Ryan objected. Once the news of our finding the silver coin gets out, and it will, according to Thayer, then the hunt will be on. We can't afford to leave any trail. Maybe Crag Keep, suggested Bart. Crag Keep, asked Ryan. Crag Keep was one of the keeps under the border lord Duke Yorick. It was west of Wardeen and sat on the southern southern end of one of the passes between the lands of Duke Yorick and those of the goblins on the far side. Exactly, he replied. I've heard that in the Great Hall there is a massive map showing the lands on both sides of the mountain range. I think Great Hall should... Hang on, I lost it. I hate it when I touch something and everything moves. Because I want to do the Great Hall capital. I think the Great Hall should be capitalized. Also, I may need to get a new mouse. I dropped it on the earlier today, and No, not every click it takes. Boo. All right, Great Hall. There was a massive map showing the lands on both sides of the mountain range. That might be what we need to look at, agreed Riyan. How are we going to gain access to the Great Hall? Let me capitalize Great Hall one more time. If I did it once, I got to do it again. Do you think they are going to just allow anyone to stroll through there? We'll worry about that when we get there, shrugged Bart. But I don't think we have many other options open to us if we wish to keep this to ourselves. I agree, Riyan said. We can leave in the morning. Bart put the end of the tube lantern to his lips and blew out the candle. Then let's get out of here. He led them from the magistrate's office and made sure the door was once again locked. After that, they went down the stairs to the front door. There, Bart peered out to be sure the area was clear, then they quickly exited the building. Bart took a moment to relock the door before the three friends headed back to Ryan's place. They spent an hour sitting up in the front room planning what they were going to do the following morning. Most of it was fairly simple, getting supplies together, clothes, that sort of thing. But what gave Riyan concern was what he was going to tell his mother. After all, it was just him and her. There was no one else to whom she could rely upon other than her son. He wasn't sure how she would take the news. In the morning, when he told her they were planning on leaving for an indeterminate amount of time, she just stared at him. We won't be gone forever, he explained. Maybe a couple weeks. Chad jumped in to help by saying, a month, tops. Of course, I don't think that really helped Ryan's situation by extending the time that they're going to be away from home. Where are you going? She asked. She had a tight rein on her emotions, and Riyan couldn't tell what her reaction was. Bart has some business down south, and we are going along, he lied. Apparently, that was the wrong thing to say, for her expression darkened and her brows knitted together. She turned her eyes on Bart and asked, haven't you brought enough trouble into this house? I assure you, Bart replied, it's nothing like that. Turning back to her son, she looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, and a tear came to her eye. I'll be okay, Mother, I promise, he said. She smiled. It was such a sad smile that it almost broke his heart. I guess this time comes in every mother's life, she said. What? He said. When her son grows up and becomes a man. Riyan didn't know how to reply to that other than going over and giving her a hug. I'll be back before Freya and Rupert's marriage, he said. Who knows what may happen between now and then. Okay, so it went from 2 weeks to a month, and now we're saying before Freya and Rupert's marriage, which is a year away. So, man, there's no telling you how long they're going to be gone doing this, right? She suddenly gripped his shoulders and pushed him back at arm's length. You're not going to kill him, are you? She asked as she stared into his eyes. Then she glanced at Bart and Chad. No! All three exclaimed at the same time. Riyan reached into his pocket and pulled out 3 of the remaining 5 gold coins they received from Thyr. Last night, the other 2 had agreed for his mother to have them to tide her over until his return. He held them out to her. She gasped when she saw them. Where did you get those? Is that important? He asked. Her expression hardened one more time. Yes, it is. Now, where'd you get them? Riyan glanced at the other 2 for help, but they weren't able to give him any. We found some treasure up in the mountains, he explained, when Bart was poisoned. Chad and I went to Wardene and sold what we found to someone that Bart knew. He gave us enough gold to help Chad's parents with replacing the grinding wheels, and now to help you while I'm gone. It might be a good idea to keep all this between us, suggested Chad. And if anyone comes around looking for me, Bart added, you haven't seen me and you don't know where I went. I don't like this one bit, she said. Then she gazed into the eyes of her son and took the 3 golds. But it would seem your mind is already made up. It'll work out for the best, he assured her. He indicated the gold in her hand and said, with that, you can pay someone to come and help with the flock. She nodded. Be careful, she said. And with those words, Riyan knew that she had resigned herself to his going. He's not sure why, but it didn't make him feel a whole lot better. We should get going before someone comes around, Bart said. Give me a minute, okay? He asked his two friends. Sure, replied Chad. He and Bart went out to the barn to ready the 3 horses they'd be taking. Once they were out, Riyan hugged his mother tightly as a tear welled from his eye. I love you, Mother. Mother should be capitalized in that instance. He said, I'll be back. I love you too, she replied with a catch in her voice. They held each other for quite a while, neither one wanting to end the moment. Finally, he disengaged from her embrace. Giving her a peck on the cheek, he left her sitting in the chair in the front room as he exited through the back door. Are you okay? Chad asked, as Riyan appeared in the barn. Nodding, Riyan said, yeah. Bart was already in the saddle and came forward with the horse Riyan was to ride. He handed him the reins and waited until he was in the saddle. Once Riyan mounted, they headed out. Riyan glanced through the doorway at the back of the house and saw his mother standing there. She waved goodbye silently as he rode away. Before he rode out of sight, he turned and waved a final time, then she was gone. None of them were very good on horseback, though they all had some experience. They made fairly decent time as they worked their way through the hills around town to the road leading south. Riyan had the sword belt around his waist that he had acquired from the thieves. Chad wore the other. Bart thought they were both dumb to wear them. You guys don't even know how to use those. There you go. So, Riyan asked, it feels good to have it on. Chad grinned at him and said, it does, doesn't it? Bart just rolled his eyes heavenward. He refused to take the sword of the man who came to kill him. They left it wrapped in some old clothes in the back of Ryan's closet. Once they came to the road running north and south, they were quite a distance south of Quillim. We should be there in just under 2 days, he told them. Ever been to Crag Keep? Asked Chad. Shaking his head, Bart replied, no, though I have talked with people who have. They rode throughout the day and the latter part of the afternoon. And in the latter part of the afternoon, the town of Horde appeared before them. On the south side is a road heading almost due west, he explained. If we take that road, we should reach Crag Keep by noon tomorrow. After what happened the last time Bart had set foot within Horde, they thought it best to skirt around the walls and head cross-country to the westward road. In fact, they found a trail of sorts that branched off a mile north of Horde that ended up bringing them to the road to Crag Keep. They hadn't traveled much farther than past where the walls of Horde disappeared behind it. That's clunky, isn't it? They haven't traveled much farther than past where the walls of Horde disappeared before stopping for the night. The day of riding was beginning to take its toll on their posteriors. They found a decent spot in the hills a short way from the road that would make an ideal campsite. The sadness of leaving home had gradually diminished until it was now nothing more than a thought that flittered across his mind from time to time. The adventure of the road had taken over, and all regrets at leaving were gone. There he was with good friends, a clear sky above, and the prospect of adventure. How in the world could he remain sad? Later that evening, after they finished their dinner and were sitting around the fire talking, Chad asked Bart, "What are you going to do with your share?" "Of the King's Horde?" he asked. "That's right," replied Chad. "Probably pay to have the death mark removed," he said. "You can do that?" Riyan asked. "Oh, sure," he replied. "Though you need to have enough gold to overcome their sense of vengeance." "How much do you think you're going to need?" Riyan asked. "I wouldn't dare to make an attempt with less than 10,000 golds," he explained. 10,000? What did you do? Bart smiled a sad smile. "I was on the wrong side of a power struggle." He grew silent and didn't say anything more about it. "As for me," Chad said, "maybe I'll learn to use this sword and go on adventures." "Now you're talking," Riyan agreed with great enthusiasm. "We could fight the forces of evil and maybe save a damsel or two. A damsel in distress or two." "You guys are crazy," Bart said with a grin. I've talked with people who've had adventures such as you two are in love with, and they say they are nothing like the sagas. They are long rides, stretched to boredom that are interrupted with moments of life-threatening ordeals, and half the time the rewards are not worth it. I don't care what you say, Ryan asserted. I'm having the time of my life. We'll see, he replied. No one's trying to kill you yet, he thought to himself. It wasn't long after that before they turned in for the night. All through the night, Ryan dreamt of treasures untold. The following morning, they had a quick bite to eat, and then were back in the saddle. The road would lead them directly to Crag Keep. It had been devoid of traffic ever since they stopped to camp the night before. Even during the night, not one traveler had been heard passing by. This place seems pretty deserted, commented Chad. You need to realize that Crag Keep is little more than a fortress sitting on this side of the Relkin Pass, he explained. Other than merchants heading to the marketplace or soldiers going to the keep, there's not much else out here. What's the marketplace? Ryan asked. You two don't know anything about nothing, do you? Bart exclaimed. The marketplace is where goblins and humans meet in the spring and summer months to trade goods. Oh, replied Chad. What do the goblins have to trade? Chad asked. Bart turned back and glanced to where Bart was riding behind him. Why do you want to know? Just curious is all. I'm not really sure, he admitted. Probably hides. I would think they would be more along the lines of being the buyers than sellers. You may be right, agreed Ryan. They rode another 2 hours. All the while the mountains grew ever closer. The hills they had been traveling through continuously became steeper until finally merging into the sides of the mountains. A river now flowed beside them on their left side as it made its way down from the mountains. It also brought colder air along with it. The road followed the banks of the river until it came to a wooden bridge. There, the river turned, passed under the bridge, and commenced flowing on their right. Once past the bridge, they rode for another hour before the walls of Crag Keep appeared before them. It was built right into the face of one of the mountains with a high wall enclosing it. A single gate loomed in the middle of the wall with a drawbridge that was currently extended. As they rode closer, they saw where a small tributary broke off from the river and made its way beneath the drawbridge, forming a moat of sorts. A soldier stood just outside the portcullis area and watched them as they approached. When their horses began crossing the drawbridge, the soldier raised his arm. I'm sorry, boys, he said. No one's allowed inside unless they have business. When the other two came to a halt, Bart rode forward another foot before he too halted. That's what we're here on, Bart said without skipping a beat. Our father will be on his way in the morning with a load of goods to trade at the marketplace from Wardine. He sent us ahead to see about getting everything arranged for making the trip over the pass. The guard stared at Bart for a second as if he was trying to determine the validity of what he was saying. Then he turned his gaze to Chad and Ryan, who worked hard at maintaining a relaxed demeanor. After coming to a decision, the guard nodded and said, Very well, you can enter. Thank you, said Bart as he got his horse moving again. Then with Ryan and Chad behind him, he entered Crag Keep. Now that they were inside the walls, they could better see the layout of the keep. Between the walls and the cliffside was a large courtyard. A group of 5 wagons were huddled together off to one side with a party of merchants moving in and around them. The keep itself was almost entirely within the mountain. At the other end of the courtyard stood the main entrance, a double door of sturdy construction. Other than the door, there was no other opening in the lower portion of the cliffside. Not until 20 feet above the ground did the first opening appear, which had to be a window, though it was rather narrow. Other windows gate from the cliff face for another 100 feet above the first one. Pretty impressive, stated Chad. Now what are we to do? Asked Ryan. Lowering his voice, he turned to Bart and said, Tomorrow morning, that guard is going to expect to see a caravan show up with our father. Keep your voice down, he said. Then he nodded to a small building on the opposite side of the courtyard from the 5 wagons. If what I heard is accurate, that's an inn. We can stay there tonight. But how are we to get into the Great Hall and view the map? Sorry. Apparently, I did not capitalize Great Hall at any time. Chad asked in a quiet voice. Bart shrugged. I don't know. Let's get settled in. I'll figure something out after that. I hope so, said Ryan as Bart led the way over to the building. It turned out that his source had been correct, for it was indeed an inn, a rather pricey inn, in fact. They used most of one of the gold coins they had left for a room for themselves and stall space for their horses. After settling in their horses and on the way back to the inn, Riyan stopped to stare at the opening to the keep. 2 guards stood watch, and he knew they wouldn't allow them to simply walk in and look around. He hoped Bart knew what he was doing. The place looked pretty daunting. Then he followed the other 2 into the inn for dinner. And that concludes chapter 14, which is pretty cool. So they're at Crag Keep. Bart's going to try to finagle them away into the Great Hall to see the map, and hopefully be able to discover where that point is on their little golden map is. Hopefully it shows it there. So I think things are coming along pretty nicely. I think if if someone asks you a question and you reply with confidence, truth or false, they're more likely to believe it. So Bart, he's got a lot of chutzpah, right? He's there and just boom, our Father's coming. And people believe him, because if you speak with confidence and what you say sounds like what they expect you to say, everything's fine. So I like Bart. He's one of my favorite characters I've made. I mean, I think he's more the hero of this than Riyan or Chad, really. But the guy I really like in this is Kevik. I knew they were going to have a magic user writing this. They had to have a magic user because if you're going to do a D&D thing, role playing, you got to have magic in it. You got to have someone who does magic. That way I can explore the whole magic thing. And I think the way I've got magic worked in this is pretty good too. Now, it is different than what James does, but it actually could be almost the same, because in James, in the Morsite Saga, I talk about how magic, how you think magic is done is the only way you can do magic, right? So James, coming from our world, treats magic like electricity, and that's how he comes at it. He sees it as a power to be manipulated. Whereas in this world, through sagas, through actual magic users, they've created this whole spell methodology and how to work magic. But since they believe that's how they can work magic, that's the only way they can. And I mean, they could rise above that, but it's so ingrained in their, because kids are raised from saga stories, from bards and minstrels, that it's going to be really hard for someone to switch. Like James and Magic on Earth, right? He didn't think there was magic on Earth, but there's magic everywhere. And he had to get past that. He had a mental block. And until he got past that mental block, he could do no magic on Earth. And then he kind of had to learn how to do magic on Earth, and so forth. Anyway, that's the end of chapter 14. Hope everyone's still enjoying it. I really enjoyed writing this book. This was a fun book to write. And tomorrow we'll see if the boys can make it into the Great Hall and find out where this place is and get their adventure started. Y'all take care.